Today, I welcome John to the show where we're going to be talking about many things, including fitness, mindset, confidence, and much, much more. So, just a quick introduction to John, and then we'll dive into our conversation that I'm very excited about having today. So, John Daniel is an online high performance coach specializing in high level professionals. By integrating fitness, health, and mindset optimization, John helps clients boost energy, focus, and business success simultaneously. With a focus on mindset cultivation and personalized strategies, John equips his clients with tools to achieve fitness and business goals. From weight loss to muscle building and revenue enhancement, John has given hundreds to success. John believes in fitness beyond aesthetics, fostering confidence and resilience. As your coach, John provides tailored plans to elevate your well-being and unlock your true potential. Work with John to prioritize health and thrive in every aspect of your life. So, welcome to the show, John. Really glad to have you on board today. So, yeah, be really interested. We're sort of touching on it a little bit before the show, but be really interesting. I see your posts on Instagram. Obviously, we've connected a little bit. I see your passion for fitness, for mindset, building people's confidence. And I can tell it's from me personally, I perceive it as a heart-driven place. So, yeah, just be really interesting to hear what's got you so driven about fitness, about mindset, about helping people with confidence. Maybe a little bit about your story into this.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for that introduction as well. I'm really excited for the juicy conversation that we're going to be having. I think one of the biggest things that I always start with is we all have a story, and that story can either be the downfall or the upbringing or uprise of what our story includes in the future. And I think for my story, it really started in the shadows of addiction and depression and a lot of anxiety. My biological father left my life at about 8 years old. So you can imagine as a young child, you don't really know why those things happen. And so acceptance was a very foreign concept for me in those formative years. I
Mm,
was really saved by the structure of sports that my stepfather and my biological mother put me in at a very young age, around 6 years old, which ultimately sparked my interest in all things health and fitness from that very formative stage. What I found at that young age was it was really an escape from all of the thoughts and the feelings that I didn't really want to feel. Because when
mm,
you're at a very young age and something traumatic happens to you and you don't know really why that's happening to you, you have to have an outlet. For a lot of people, that outlet can be alcohol or drugs. Or for me, at a young age, it was those sports and it was being included in an environment. So at that young age, my family put me into all of these different sports that were all year round. So it was touching on all of the seasons, which was it was beautiful because I was now included in something that was building the kind of individual that I wanted to be, and ultimately filling that void that the acceptance void. Now, as I grew older and those sports kind of started to be limited, obviously, when you go into the collegiate world and university, they always tell you that you got to pick one sport. And so that one sport for myself was college wrestling. Well, as I started to transition into the university sport, there's always that 3 or 4 month time period after the sport is over. Now, as I was growing up, I was doing sports year round. So I was
mm,
constantly distracted and I never really had time to just sit with my own thoughts. And after that first college season of wrestling, there was about 3 or 4 months where we were in the off season. And so we were kind of able to kind of do what we wanted and really was forced to
mm,
sit with those own thought or with my own thoughts for the first time in my entire life. And you can imagine when you're feeling things that you haven't felt before, your first instinct is to drown that pain and drown those emotions that may not feel too well. So, naturally, as a coping mechanism, growing up with a father that was addicted to alcohol, a mother that was addicted to drugs and alcohol, my natural coping mechanism was to drown and void those emotions with drugs and alcohol. And so I started hanging around the bad people, the people that weren't necessarily with the same mission of being a high performance athlete. But really, what I noticed in those times was that wasn't who I was. And then once the season started back up again, I was doing the wrestling thing, and I was working out at a very high level, and it was clean, and I felt the best I had ever felt before. And then the season would end, and I would fall back into that 3 month pattern, and then the season would start again, and then I would fall back into that 3 month
Mm,
pattern. And what I noticed after those years is I knew that wrestling was going to come to an end, where
mm,
I was not going to have that distraction of being in season. And so leading up to the year of my last year in college wrestling, I didn't really know what I was going to do, because my whole identity has always been wrapped around sports and being in season. Well, as I go into the real world and navigated that whole experience, I was sitting in a cubicle, and I realized that my whole identity had been stripped from me because I didn't have the wrestling anymore. And now what used to be 3 or 4 months in the off season sitting with those thoughts, I was now injected into the real world of sitting with those thoughts every single day. And
mm,
so that pattern of using drugs and alcohol to numb those feelings became an everyday thing. And that's not very sustainable. And obviously, as you start to do that every single day, that trickles down into all of these pillars of your life, and you're not really showing up the way you want to be. And that led me down a very, very dark path, to
mm.
a point where I really didn't want to be alive anymore. And there was a point where I was living in my parents' basement. I was drinking a bottle of alcohol every single day just to numb and fill the void of those negative emotions. And it got to this point where my mom came down to the basement where I was living, and she said, "John, I don't know who you are anymore. Once wrestling was over, you completely shifted into a person that I've never even seen before. What's going on here?" And in that moment, that was really the eye-opening point in time where I wasn't the person that I knew I was. I was a person that was doing, these negative things and treating people in certain ways that I didn't really want to be treating them. And so I had to ask myself one question: how can I pull myself out of this? So naturally, I took all of the wisdom that I had gained from all of my past coaches who had given me a roadmap to success. And I basically needed to do that for myself in the real world, and understanding how I can be the boss of my own life and overcome what I've got going on right now. And so naturally, I went and did a lot of research, tried to find coaches and counselors. And I ran into a therapist at the gym one day. And, she started talking to me, and she said, "John, I'd love to have a visit with you and talk to you about some of this stuff." And I had always been turned off by the idea of therapy. Growing up, it was always a thing that you didn't do. You just kind of took it on the chin and you kept moving. And so I was very hesitant and reluctant to trying that, but I knew something had to change. And nothing changes if nothing changes. And so that I took that one leap of faith, and I hired that therapist, and I started going twice a week for about a year, and really started to rewire those thoughts. And ultimately, I found myself back in the gym, right in those roots where that stems of confidence really came from. And that's kind of what led me to the point where I'm at right now, of having that be my entire life, of teaching other individuals how they can use the gym as the catalyst for the success in all of the pillars of their life.
Oh wow, I love that. So yeah, thanks for the story and your openness and where you went. And yeah, it sounds like you went through like different like things to distract yourself through your life. So there was the even if like I can totally relate as well. Even if I wasn't in myself consciously aware of it, sounds like you were kind of doing these things like wrestling and then into maybe the drugs and the alcohol, and it's just kind of this cycle, right? Um, and then sort of that's how you went on, and then there's kind of like that break. Is there like something you found, like you mentioned, obviously the therapist and the gym, were those like the most effective ways you found personally for dealing with things, or have you found any other useful tools for kind of processing some of these things?
Yeah, of course. I think it's a big evolution journey for myself. I've constantly, as I've gone through my journey, I've tried a lot of different things. I've done plant medicine. I do meditation in the morning. One of the biggest things that I've included in my day-to-day routine is literally just a 30-minute walk outside, where I can focus on the
Mhm.
sounds and the smells of the universe and being really present in the moment. And that was one thing that I didn't want to be when I was drowning it out with the distraction of sports or the distraction of drugs and alcohol. I didn't want to be present in that moment. I was drowning out what that present moment was. And so as I've kind of evolved through my journey, I've really tried to implement things that but really force me to appreciate that present moment. And the more we can focus on that present moment and be grateful for that present moment, the more peace I've realized comes into my life. But obviously, what I do for my job is teaching people how to find mind body alignment, which ultimately impacts all of these other pillars of their life. Because once we actually start feeling confident, having more energy, going to the gym starts to build those seeds of confidence. And now, naturally, if you're a leader on a team or you're a leader in your family, those things really start to show up and people start to view you in a way that you should be viewed as. And that's one thing that I think everyone really needs to understand is if there's something inside of you saying there's something missing or this can't be it, that's your answer that there isn't, it's not it, and you can find those things. You just have to take that one step, even if it's going on a 30-minute walk or having 10 minutes in the morning. We all just have to do that one thing for us.
I love that. Yeah, just finding that one thing, and it sounds like what you're helping people in business as well, right? And that comes from the like going to the gym a little bit, or kind of like working on that for the individual, maybe a little bit resistant to, or maybe lacking the confidence to go to the gym. I know I love going to the gym, but I know it, or kind of even just doing some exercise. I know I love it. I'm a half marathon runner, all these kind of things. But how how can they start maybe integrating that into their life if they feel like they want to, but perhaps they're lacking the motivation, the confidence to do that?
Yeah, of course. Well, one thing that I like to talk about in terms of motivation is it's very short-lived. And
Mm,
we can use motivation to force us to move in that one moment. But when we talk about consistency and sustainable health, which should be our main goal, right? We want to be able to pick up our grandchildren. We want to be able to carry our groceries inside from our car. When we want to be able to do those things when we're at an old age. Well, if we start to think about what motivates us to be consistent in those things, we have to get very, very deep on the reasons of why we're actually doing it. And when I say very deep on it, I mean we have to get super clear on the visual of bringing that to the forefront of our mind every single day when we don't want to do the things that we have to do. For example, if we notice that there's resistance in showing up to the gym, maybe we start to reframe some of these things and saying, okay, well, if I don't want to go to the gym, what is the long term effect if I do show up today? And what does that feel like when
mm,
I start to see success in that? And if we can start to pull those emotions of what the future result is going to be, that is actually what's going to propel us into action of doing whatever it is we're trying to do.
mm. So going a bit deeper into like those long term impacts. I love that. And
Exactly.
exploring that, like whether it's your grandkids or kind of maybe it's something like carrying the, or maybe it's just like carrying the groceries, but that health ultimately, and seeing what it is for you. No, that's cool. So with obviously going to the gym, do you help people also with their mind around like life as well?
100%. I
Mm,
do. That's one of the most beautiful things about what I do actually is the 6 inches between your ears. And
mm,
I always say that if you're a high level professional or a high level performer, your business or your professional work can only grow to the extent of your own internal growth. And that one pillar
mm,
of going to the gym is just a starting point. But I always say that I always talk about congruency, and congruency is a very powerful thing. When you are who you say you are, people see that, right? But when you aren't, people also see that too. And I think the problem here is sometimes your ego can look out for your feelings before it sees that part of you that needs to change or become better. And when this happens, we just tell ourselves, oh, we're good as is. But when your ego protects your feelings, ironically, it ruins your image. And because of the incongruence, leadership cannot coexist with that. And so we always have to understand, what's the end goal here? How do I want to view myself and how do I want others to view me? And using that as the forefront or the 6 inches between our ears as the driver to actually go to the gym.
mm. Yeah, what's the goal here? Because yeah, certainly can relate to like trying to keep away from those short term like discomforts or uncomfortable feelings. But yeah, ultimately, what's that ultimate like end goal you're trying to get to? For the for like a lot of us, I know that there's always people I speak to, and I've definitely said it myself, but there's like a so much time we've got in a day, and getting to things like the gym or doing things that we feel like we want to do can be quite challenging. Is this something you work with people around how they can really maybe optimize their time, how they can make it more effective for them as well? Just be really interesting to hear your kind of perspective on that.
Of course. One thing I always hear is we all have the same 24 hours in a
Mm,
day. And after doing a lot of this work, I realized that yes, we all do have 24 hours in a day, but we all have different 24 hours in a day.
mm,
Some people may have 3 children and running a business.
mm,
Some people may not have any children and running a business, but are also trying to make it to the gym. So what we have to understand is we have to get a roadmap of what our current schedule and routine looks like right now, and starting from that baseline of understanding where there may be time gaps at the end of the night when we're endlessly scrolling on our phones, or we may be watching Netflix, or we may just not be doing anything, right? And so we have to understand how we can optimize these habits, these rituals, and these routines to really understand where these constraints that inhibit you from moving the needle in aligning your mind and your body, because that's the end goal here. Once our mind and our body are in alignment, now we can start to show up in all of these areas of our life, which ultimately, if you're a business owner, is going to boost the revenue, because now you're able to lead people by example. They're going to be viewing you in a more of an authoritative standpoint. And so through a lot of the prioritization and boundary work that I do with my clients, I noticed that you
mm,
can carve out the necessary time for self-care and personal development. And I think by identifying your most important tasks and allowing them to have dedicated time for exercise, meditation, and reflection, because reflection is a big part of this, understanding, are we moving the needle in the right
mm,
place? We can then optimize our daily schedule to enhance both our physical and our mental well-being.
mm. Yeah, I yeah, I find like I've worked and coached with people as well, and we've all got different schedules. So yeah, you're ultimately saying about finding what you've got, like what's the most important thing, how can we optimize that for you a little bit to make sure what you're aiming towards is you're getting closer towards with your routine. I like that. So you also, John, mentioned something about setting boundaries. We'd just like to hear a little bit more about that, because it can mean different things to different people, and I often hear people like have challenges with that.
Boundaries, my favorite conversation. I always say learning to say no. Learning to
Mm,
say no to activities and commitments that do not align with your goals and your values. By doing that, that now allows you to focus on what truly matters. And I think that we've kind of been going back to this of understanding what does truly matter for you. And so by having these clear boundaries that are not in alignment with what our end goal is, we can start to build that as a habit. And so the second, I'll give you some background on myself. I'm a recovering people pleaser. And so this part of the growth journey for myself has been very difficult, because every time somebody asks me to do something, I'll be the first one to say yes. But now it's gotten to the point where I can understand, okay, me saying no is not being mean, but it's actually just valuing what I appreciate and what my end goal is. And if it's the person that's alongside me that actually wants me to elevate in that realm,
mm,
well, they're not going to feel as that it's a bad thing for saying no. They're actually going to encourage that conversation and encourage that boundary, because they know that's what's healthy for me. And so I think through this whole process, you start to understand certain people that are with you and certain people that are against you. And we all have those people in our life. And I think it's all a learning example of what clear boundaries really look like and where we need to have those clear boundaries up.
mm. Thanks for sharing the sort of the people pleasing element as well, because I know a lot of people have reached out to me on this podcast in particular, like mentioned it's kind of been a challenge. So, like what you said about there, and then the people in your life kind of align to that as well. Like there may be some changes, but ultimately it's about understanding your values, right, and where you what's really important to you. No, a really powerful one. And talking about people like close to you, What this is a question I sometimes like to ask people. What has the impact of community, or maybe not, had on you in your journey? Like the people, the groups you've been part of, the people you've had in your life. Because you mentioned there was a time where you stopped your sport and then you went to a group and you got into the drugs and the alcohol. But have you also found groups to kind of like lift you up, and has that had a impact on you?
Of course, 100%. I would say that that's one of the biggest catalysts for the success that I've had and really the elevation in my journey. I think that when I was understanding at that first time that this group of people was not good for myself, there was almost this pause in time where I had to not speak to anyone because I had to understand what it was that I really wanted with myself to then understand what that meant by attracting community. And so going inside and internal, and as I started to grow and develop in certain ways, naturally I was placing myself in certain environments where those people were on the same roadmap. So, for example, here in Austin, Texas, there's a lot of networking events. That's one of the biggest things I do on a weekly basis because I understand that those people are also mission driven and that there's a lot of the times we're going to find a lot of congruency with my mission and their mission and the hard work and the work ethic that comes into actually making that mission achievable. So I would say that the more people that you surround yourself by that are in complete alignment with what your mission is, doesn't mean that it has to be the same business or anything like that, but more so just, hey, do you have a passion? Do I have a passion? Are we doing everything it takes to actually make that passion come to fruition? All right, we can get real on that and let's build each other up in that mission. And now naturally, you're going to be surrounded by more and more people that are alongside you.
I like the suggestion of networking events as well, and then also lighting up each other's passion. That's been a big one for me as well. I've certainly found in my journey, and yeah, must remind myself to go to Austin because there's so many people that are just like mention about it. So it sounds like an awesome place to be. So yeah, like one thing I wanted to touch on, John, was about setbacks because I know you help people. You've helped people in like business, but just in life we can have setbacks, right? I know you've gone through some. You've obviously shared you've gone through some tough times. When perhaps things are a little bit tough on you, or maybe emotionally things are coming up, what do you find useful in those cases for yourself, or maybe with your clients that you've helped through, um, to do in those moments? Because I know a lot of people listening have had some hard challenges come at them, and it's quite hard to they find it quite hard to bounce back sometimes.
Yeah, that's a great question. When those times happen, because they're always going to happen in our life, it's inevitable. Life's going to throw things at you that you may not know how to handle or deal with in that current moment. It almost comes down to the pause, understanding what's going on and why what's going on is currently happening. And so I like to use this analogy of looking in the mirror. And so when you look in the mirror, we have to find the areas where it may be a little bit foggy. And so, if we can spotlight those areas of fogginess, we can then go to work and take one step that day to clean that part of the mirror up to make it a little bit more clear. The only way that we can actually see where it's foggy, though, is through awareness. We actually have to look. So, if we're never looking in the mirror, we're kind of going through, we're naturally just on autopilot with distraction because that's naturally what we do as human
Mm,
beings. We want to distract ourselves from the things that we don't want to face.
yeah,
So I
been
would
there.
say that making that regular pattern of looking into the mirror and seeing where it's foggy, you take that one step that day of where that fogginess is and go to start to clean that up.
Mm, I like that. Quite a proactive like element as well, rather than. And one of my mentors says he's got a good phrase: "Catch the monster while it's a baby before it kind of like spirals out of control."
Right.
It's just good. He's kind of he talks about this like, all right, get to feel what what the bad thing that maybe the challenging thing is, and then sort of interrupt it, work through it before it kind of gets out of control. So I like your analogy of like looking in that mirror when it's getting a little bit foggy, rather than just being on that autopilot. Um, yeah. So John, before we sort of like wrap up today, I just wondered if there was maybe a final point that you wanted to share with us around maybe confidence or mindset that the listener might find useful. Maybe it's something we've already talked about, maybe it's a recap. And also, if the listener wants to find out a little bit more about you, connect with your work, I know you've got tons of value on Instagram, for example, where they can find you.
Of course, I will end with this note here. At the end of our journey, it's not the adversity we face that defines us, but rather our responses to it.
Hmm.
And in that response is how our identity is formed. So I would challenge you guys to look in the mirror, see where it may be foggy, go and charge that adversity, and then have that define you as your self. And then at the end of the day, you can be proud in what actions you're taking because you're proactively cleaning that mirror. In terms of how you guys can reach out to me or connect with me, I'm on all platforms: LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. I'm primarily focused on Instagram and LinkedIn. So you can connect with me at Only John Daniel on Instagram, and you can just type in John Daniel on LinkedIn, and I will be the first result that pops up there.
Amazing. We'll be sure to put your links in the show notes so the listener can connect with you and
Beautiful.
find out more about your work. So, once again, John, a massive thank you for coming on today and sharing a ton of value as you have.
Thanks, Johnny. I appreciate the platform.